The morning sun cast golden ripples across Lake Serenity as Vivian Clark stood on the wraparound deck of their architectural masterpiece, watching the catering staff arrange white peonies and baby blue hydrangeas. At 7 months pregnant, she moved with the careful grace of a woman protecting precious cargo, one hand instinctively resting on her rounded belly where their son kicked with increasing vigor. "Everything looks absolutely divine, darling," Marcus called from behind her, his voice carrying that warm timbre that had first captured her heart 5 years ago. He approached with 2 cups of herbal tea, his dark hair still damp from his morning shower, the scent of his cologne mixing pleasantly with the lake breeze. Vivian accepted the cup gratefully, leaning into his embrace as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I just want everything perfect for him," she murmured, feeling their baby respond to his father's presence with a particularly enthusiastic kick. Marcus chuckled, his breath warm against her ear. "He's already perfect because he's ours." His hands covered hers on her belly, and for a moment the world felt complete. This was their dream, the successful architect and his devoted wife, expecting their first child in a home that graced the cover of Architectural Digest. The first guests began arriving at noon. A carefully curated collection of Marcus's colleagues, Vivian's book club friends, and family members who cooed appropriately over the elegant nautical theme. Navy blue anchors adorned the tables, while miniature sailboats filled with white. Roses served as centerpieces. A 3-tiered cake shaped like a lighthouse stood as the celebration's crowning glory. "Vivian, you look radiant," gushed Patricia Hendricks from the country club, air-kissing both cheeks. "Marcus is such a lucky man. When I was pregnant with my third, I looked like a beached whale by 7 months." Vivian smiled graciously, though inwardly she cringed. These social gatherings always felt like performances, each interaction choreographed to maintain their image as the perfect couple. Marcus worked the room effortlessly, discussing his latest commercial project with other architects while keeping one eye on her, occasionally catching her gaze across the crowded living room and flashing that boyish grin that still made her pulse quicken. Her sister Nora appeared beside her, practical as always in a simple navy dress that complemented her auburn hair. "You're glowing, Viv, but you look tired. Are you sleeping okay?" "As well as can be expected with a future soccer player practicing in my ribs," Vivian replied, grateful for her sister's genuine concern. Nora had been her anchor through everything college, their parents' divorce, the early struggles of Marcus building his firm. "Marcus seems distracted today," Nora observed quietly, following Vivian's gaze to where her husband stood. "Is everything all right with the business?" Before Vivian could respond, the energy in the room shifted palpably. Conversations quieted, heads turned toward the French doors leading from the deck. A woman stood silhouetted against the afternoon sun, tall and elegant with honey-blonde hair cascading in perfect waves. She wore a dress that made Vivian's breath-catchy, pristine white silk that hugged every curve, more appropriate for a wedding than a baby shower. "Who is that?" Nora whispered, but Vivian already knew. She'd seen photos of Marcus's business partner, though they'd never met in person. "Celeste," Vivian murmured, watching as the woman glided into their living room with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she went. The white dress seemed to glow under the crystal chandelier, drawing every eye in the room. Marcus appeared frozen for a heartbeat before breaking into his professional smile. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Celeste Manning, my business partner. She's been instrumental in our recent expansion into sustainable architecture." Celeste's smile was dazzling as she accepted congratulations and made small talk. But Vivian noticed how her gaze kept returning to Marcus, how she positioned herself just slightly too close when they spoke. The white dress felt like a statement, a claiming that made Vivian's skin prickle with unease. "Bold choice," Patricia Hendricks murmured behind her champagne flute, her tone carrying enough poison to kill a garden. "It's just a dress," Marcus said later when he found Vivian in the kitchen, refilling the appetizer trays. But his voice carried a defensive edge she'd rarely heard. "A white dress, Marcus. To a baby shower. Your wife's baby shower." Vivian kept her tone light, but her knuckles were white as she gripped the serving tray. He laughed, but it sounded forced. "You know Celeste, she's always been unconventional." It probably didn't even occur to her. She's not exactly the maternal type. The dismissal stung more than the dress itself. Vivian had built a career as a children's book illustrator, had always dreamed of filling their home with laughter and tiny footsteps. To be reduced to the maternal type felt like being filed away in a box marked wife and mother, important but ultimately predictable. When they returned to the party, Celeste was examining the lighthouse cake with apparent fascination. "How exquisite," she purred, her fingers trailing along the blue frosting waves. "Such attention to detail. It reminds me of that little bed and breakfast we visited in Maine, Marcus. Remember?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Vivian's heart began to race as she realized she'd never been to Maine with Marcus, but clearly Celeste had. The room felt suddenly too warm, too bright, filled with too many watching eyes. "I think it's time to cut the cake," Nora announced loudly, appearing with the silver knife as if sensing the tension. Everyone gathered around. As Vivian and Marcus positioned themselves behind the beautiful lighthouse cake, cameras flashing. Around them, she caught Celeste watching from across the room. The woman's expression was unreadable, but something in her eyes sent a chill down Vivian's spine. The perfect celebration suddenly felt like a carefully constructed lie, and the white dress seemed less like poor judgment and more like a declaration of war. The last guest departed as twilight painted the lake in shades of purple and gold. Vivian stood in their living room, surrounded by the debris of celebration crumpled wrapping paper, half-empty champagne flutes, and the lingering scent of awe. White peonies that now seemed cloying rather than elegant. Marcus loosened his tie, the picture of casual sophistication, but Vivian noticed the tension in his shoulders. "That went well," he said, avoiding her eyes as he gathered empty plates. Everyone seemed to enjoy themselves. "Everyone except your business partner," Vivian replied carefully, settling into the cream leather armchair that had become her fortress during these final months of pregnancy. She seemed uncomfortable. Celeste is always intense about work. She probably had projects on her mind. Marcus's response came too quickly, too rehearsed. Vivian studied her husband's profile as he moved around their living room. When had she stopped really seeing him? The Marcus she'd fallen in love with had been open, spontaneous, quick to laugh at his own mistakes. This version felt like a carefully constructed facade. "The Maine bed and breakfast," she said quietly. "When did you two go to Maine?" Marcus froze, a champagne flute halfway to the kitchen. "It was a business trip. Last spring, when we were researching that eco-resort project. You told me that trip was to Portland, Oregon." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Marcus set down the glass with deliberate care, finally turning to face her. It was a complex itinerary. We had multiple stops. Lies came so easily to him now. Vivian wondered when that had started, when the man who once couldn't keep a surprise. Party Secret had become someone who could look her in the eyes and fabricate entire trips. "I'm tired," she said, struggling to rise from the chair. "The baby's been active all day." Marcus was beside her instantly, his hands gentle as he helped her up. For a moment, she remembered the night they'd conceived their son, a late summer evening when they'd made love on the deck under the stars, her body arching beneath his as he whispered promises of forever against her skin. The memory felt like it belonged to different people. That night, she lay awake listening to Marcus's breathing, waiting for it to deepen into sleep. When she was certain he wouldn't wake, she slipped from bed and padded barefoot to his study. His phone lay charging on the mahogany desk, and her heart hammered as she picked it up. She knew his passcode, their anniversary date, and felt a stab of pain that he hadn't bothered to change it. The text messages loaded, and Vivian's world tilted on its axis. Celeste. Playing house today was harder than I expected. Marcus. I know. Soon, I promise. After the baby comes, we'll figure this out. Celeste. I can't keep pretending we're just business partners. The way she looked at me today, ... Marcus. She doesn't suspect anything. Just a little longer. Vivian's knees gave out, and she sank into Marcus's leather chair, the phone trembling in her hands. The messages went back months' intimate conversations, plans for weekend getaways, discussions about their future together. Her future, apparently, was the inconvenient obstacle they needed to navigate around. The baby kicked forcefully, as if sensing her distress, and Vivian pressed both hands to her belly. I'm sorry, little one, she whispered. I'm so sorry your world is falling apart before you're even born. She scrolled further back, finding photos that made her stomach lurch. Marcus and Celeste at dinner in intimate restaurants she'd never been to. Marcus and Celeste on a beach she didn't recognize, his arms around her waist in the same protective way he once held Vivian. Marcus and Celeste in what looked like a hotel room, her head on his chest, both of them sleeping peacefully. Dates on the photos told a story of systematic betrayal. While Vivian had been dealing with morning sickness, Marcus had been taking Celeste to wine tastings. While Vivian had been decorating the nursery, Marcus had been booking romantic getaways. While Vivian had been growing their child, Marcus had been building a life with someone else. A new message popped up, and Vivian watched in real time as her marriage crumbled further. Celeste, I love you. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. Marcus, I love you too. Everything will change after the baby is born. Vivian set the phone down with exaggerated care, as if it might explode. Her hands shook as she realized the implications. They were waiting for her to give birth, to fulfill her biological purpose, before discarding her entirely. She thought of Celeste's white dress, no longer seeing it as a fashion misstep, but as a preview of coming attractions. The woman who would replace her had been auditioning for the role in front of their friends and family, and Vivian had been too trusting to see it. Back in their bedroom, Marcus slept peacefully, one arm flung across the space where she should have been lying. His face looked younger in sleep, vulnerable in a way that once would have made her heart ache with tenderness. Now she felt only a cold, growing anger. Her son chose that moment to kick again, and Vivian pressed her lips to her belly. Your daddy is going to learn that some things are worth fighting for, she whispered. And some people are stronger than they look. Dawn was breaking over Lake Serenity as Vivian sat in the nursery they'd painted together, surrounded by gifts from yesterday's celebration. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was planning to become a single mother while sitting in a room designed for a happy family. But as she watched the sunrise paint the lake in shades of hope, Vivian felt something she hadn't expected: relief. The performance was over. The facade could finally fall. And for the first time in months, she could stop pretending her marriage was perfect and start building something real. 3 days passed in a careful dance of normalcy. Vivian played the role of devoted wife, while Marcus continued his performance as the expectant father. But now she saw every gesture as choreographed deception. She watched him kiss her goodbye each morning, knowing he was probably meeting Celeste. She listened to his stories about client meetings, cataloging each lie for future reference. On Thursday morning, after Marcus left for what he claimed was a site inspection in the city, Vivian made a phone call that would change everything. Ross Investigations, this is Diana. I need to hire a private investigator, Vivian said, her voice steadier than she felt. My husband is having an affair, and I need proof. Diana Ross arrived that afternoon, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with prematurely gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd seen every form of human deception. She sat across from Vivian in the living room where the baby shower had taken. Place, notebook open, expression professionally sympathetic. I know this is difficult, Diana said gently, but the more information you can give me, the better I can help you. Vivian shared everything, the mysterious business trips, the defensive behavior, the text messages she'd discovered. Diana took notes without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions that made Vivian realize how many red flags she'd ignored. I'll need photos of both your husband and this Celeste woman, Diana said, and any information you have about their usual haunts. Based on what you've told me, this isn't a casual affair. They're planning a future together. The words hit Vivian like a physical blow, even though she'd already suspected as much. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that hurt down to her bones. How long will it take? Vivian asked. Affairs leave trails, Diana replied, closing her notebook. Give me a week. That week crawled by in a haze of forced conversations and sleepless nights. Vivian found herself studying Marcus with the intensity of a scientist, noting how he checked his phone constantly, how he volunteered for evening meetings that kept him out past dinner, how he seemed distracted even during their most intimate moments. On Tuesday evening, as they shared what Marcus claimed would be a quiet dinner at home, he reached across the table to take her hand. I've been thinking, he said, his thumb stroking her knuckles in the familiar gesture that once made her melt. After the baby comes, maybe you should take an extended maternity leave. Really focus on being a mother. The suggestion felt like a trap, though Vivian couldn't pinpoint why. I love my work, she replied carefully. Illustrating children's books has always been my passion. Of course, but things will be different now. We'll be different. His smile was warm, but something cold flickered in his eyes. I just want you to have options. Options. The word felt loaded with implications she didn't want to examine. Was he planning to make her financially dependent before he left? Or was this some twisted attempt to assuage his guilt by ensuring she could focus on their child while he built a new life? Diana called Friday afternoon with news that shattered what remained of Vivian's world. I have what you need, the investigator sighed, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact. But I think you should sit down. Vivian was already sitting, but she gripped the phone tighter as Diana continued. Your husband and Celeste Manning have been together for over 18 months. They've taken at least 6 trips together, always to destinations he didn't share with you. They have a joint savings account with substantial funds, money that appears to have been diverted from your husband's business accounts. Each revelation felt like a knife twist, but Diana wasn't finished. There's something else, Vivian. Celeste Manning is pregnant. The phone slipped from Vivian's numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The baby kicked frantically, as if responding to her shock, and she pressed both hands to her belly while trying to process this final betrayal. Diana's voice continued from the phone on the floor, tinny but clear. Based on medical records I was able to access, she's approximately 4 months along. I'm so sorry, Vivian. 4 months. Vivian did the math with growing horror. Celeste had gotten pregnant around the same time. Vivian had announced her own pregnancy to Marcus. While they'd been celebrating the coming addition to their family, Marcus had been creating another family entirely. She retrieved the phone with shaking hands. Are you certain? I have photos, financial records, and witness statements. They've been telling people they're engaged. Celeste has been looking at wedding venues for next spring, after the baby was born. After Vivian had served her purpose, that evening, Marcus came home with flowers-white roses that now seemed like a mockery. "For my beautiful wife," he said, kissing her cheek with the same lips that had been making promises to another woman. "They're lovely," Vivian managed, accepting the bouquet while imagining how satisfying it would be to throw them in his face. As Marcus showered, Vivian sat in their bedroom holding Diana's envelope of evidence. Photos of Marcus and Celeste looking every inch the happy couple. Bank statements showing the systematic draining of their joint accounts. A copy of a lease for an apartment downtown, signed by both of them. The final photo made her stomach lurch. Marcus and Celeste at what looked like a doctor's appointment, her hand resting on her barely visible bump while he gazed at her with the same wonder he'd shown when Vivian first told him about their baby. 2 families, 2 pregnancies, 2 sets of dreams, and Vivian was apparently the expendable one. Marcus emerged from the bathroom, humming cheerfully, and Vivian carefully slid the evidence back into the envelope. Not tonight. She needed a plan first, needed to understand exactly what she was fighting for and what she was willing to lose. But as she lay beside him that night, listening to the sound of his breathing and feeling their son moving beneath her heart, Vivian made a promise to herself and her unborn child. Marcus and Celeste had underestimated her completely. They were about to learn that the quiet, trusting wife they'd been deceiving was capable of fighting harder than they could possibly imagine. Vivian spent the weekend in careful preparation, consulting with Patricia Goldman, the divorce attorney Diana had recommended. Patricia was a steel-wrapped-in-silk type who specialized in high-asset divorces and had the reputation of a shark in designer heels. "You have an excellent case," Patricia said, reviewing Diana's evidence across her mahogany desk. "Adultery, financial misconduct, and the fact that he's essentially been planning to abandon you and his child. Any judge will see through his charm." "I want to confront them first," Vivian said, surprising herself with the steel in her own voice. "Both of them, together." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "That's not typically advisable. Emotional confrontations rarely work in our favor legally." "This isn't about the divorce," Vivian replied. "This is about looking them in the eyes when I destroy their little fantasy." Monday evening, Vivian put her plan into motion. She called Marcus at his office, her voice carefully modulated to sound like the trusting wife he expected. "Darling, could you bring Celeste by the house tonight? I've been thinking about what you said about taking time off, and I'd love to discuss some project ideas with her. Maybe we could collaborate on something." The pause on the other end told her everything she needed to know. Marcus was calculating, trying to figure out if this was safe or a trap. "That's thoughtful of you," he said finally. "But Celeste is very busy with the please, Marcus. I feel like I've been rude, not getting to know your business partner better, especially after that lovely dress she wore to the shower. I'd love to compliment her style in person." Another pause. "All right, we'll be there around 7. Vivian spent the afternoon setting the stage. She arranged Diana's evidence in neat piles on the dining room table, then covered it all with an elegant tablecloth. She put fresh flowers in a vase, white roses, just like the ones Marcus had brought her. She even put on the dress she'd worn to announce her pregnancy to Marcus 5 months ago, when their world had seemed full of infinite possibility. They arrived precisely at 7, and Vivian watched through the window as they walked up the stone pathway to her front door. Marcus's hand rested protectively on Celeste's lower back, and even from a distance, Vivian could see the slight swell of the other woman's belly beneath her flowing tunic. "Vivian!" Celeste's smile was dazzling as she entered, kissing the air beside Vivian's cheeks in the European fashion. "You look absolutely radiant. Pregnancy suits you so well." The audacity was breathtaking. This woman was carrying her husband's child while complimenting Vivian on her own pregnancy glow. "Thank you," Vivian replied smoothly. "Please, come sit in the dining room. I've prepared some things to show you. Marcus looked relaxed, probably thinking he'd navigated another potential disaster. Celeste glided into the dining room with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. They both took seats at the polished table where Vivian had served countless dinner parties, where she'd told Marcus about the baby, where they'd planned their future together. So, Vivian said, taking her place at the head of the table, I thought we should discuss your future projects. She pulled away the tablecloth with a flourish, revealing the neat stacks of evidence like a magician revealing the final trick. Photos, bank statements, medical records, and hotel receipts spread across the mahogany surface dot. The silence was deafening. Marcus went white as parchment, while Celeste's carefully composed expression cracked like fine porcelain. I know about the apartment downtown, Vivian said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. The one you've been furnishing together. I know about the joint bank account funded with money stolen from our marriage. I know about the trips to Martha's Vineyard and the Hamptons while I was home with morning sickness. She picked up a photo of them at what was clearly a romantic dinner, candles reflected in their adoring gazes. I especially know about this little vacation last month, when Marcus told me he was attending a conference in Boston. Marcus found his voice first. Vivian, let me explain. Explain what? She interrupted, her voice remaining eerily calm. Explain how you've been planning to leave me after I give birth to your child. Explain how you've been stealing from our joint accounts to fund your love nest. Or maybe you'd like to explain this. She held up the photo from what was clearly a doctor's appointment, Celeste's hand on her small bump while Marcus gazed at her with wonder. Congratulations, by the way, Vivian continued, turning to Celeste. When are you due? March? April? It must have been quite the surprise, getting pregnant so soon after I announced my own pregnancy. Celeste finally spoke, her voice lacking its usual confident purr. Vivian, you don't understand. We never meant for it to happen this way. Which part? Vivian asked, leaning back in her chair with the composure of a queen holding court. The part where you seduced my husband, or the part where you got pregnant with his child while I was carrying his other child? Or maybe you mean the part where you've been planning to wait until I've recovered from childbirth before you steal. My life? Marcus slammed his hand on the table, finally showing his true colors. This is exactly why He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Why you what, Marcus? Why you had to find someone else? Why you couldn't just ask for a divorce, like an honest man? Vivian stood, her hands protectively cradling her belly. Or why you decided to have your cake and eat it too. Celeste's mask finally fell completely. He doesn't love you anymore, Vivian. He hasn't for over a year. We're in love. We're building a real life together. Built on lies and theft, Vivian interrupted. How romantic. You don't understand what it's like, Celeste continued, her voice rising with desperation. Being the other woman, watching him come home to you every night, pretending to care about your precious baby shower, while knowing his heart was somewhere else. His heart? Vivian laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. You think this is about love? This is about a man too cowardly to end one relationship before starting another, and a woman too selfish to care about the destruction she causes. Marcus finally stood, his charming mask completely abandoned. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I love Celeste. Yes, we've been planning a future together. You're right about everything, Vivian. Are you happy now? Deliriously, Vivian replied. Because now I know exactly what kind of man I married and exactly what kind of man I'm divorcing. She walked to the front door and opened it wide, the cool evening air rushing in like a cleansing breath. Get out of my house, she said quietly. Both of you. And Marcus, my lawyer will be in touch about custody arrangements. I hope your new life was worth destroying your relationship with your son. as they left Celeste's heels clicking indignantly. On the stone pathway, Marcus's shoulders hunched in defeat. Vivian closed the door and leaned against it, her heart hammering with adrenaline and relief. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. Bruised, betrayed, but undeniably strong, the baby kicked vigorously, and Vivian smiled through her tears. "Just you and me now, little one," she whispered, "and we're going to be just fine." 6 months later, Vivian stood in the kitchen of her new townhouse, bouncing baby Oliver on her hip while attempting to pour coffee with a free hand. The morning sun streamed through windows she'd decorated herself, casting warm light on the breakfast nook where her sketchbooks lay scattered among baby bottles and burp cloths. Oliver gurgled happily, his tiny fingers grasping at the pendant necklace Nora had given her, a silver tree with deep roots, symbolizing strength and new growth. At 3 months old, he had Marcus's dark hair, but Vivian's gray eyes, and thankfully showed no signs of his father's talent for deception. "Someone's in a good mood this morning," she murmured, kissing the downy crown of his head. The smell of him powder and milk, and that indefinable sweetness of babies filled her with a contentment she'd never expected to feel as a single mother. The divorce had been brutal but swift. Patricia had been ruthless in court, and Marcus's attempts to play the wounded party had backfired spectacularly when the judge reviewed the evidence. Vivian had received the house initially, but chose to sell it instead. Too many memories, stained with lies. This smaller place felt like home in a way the lakeside mansion never had. Marcus saw Oliver every other weekend, though his visits were stilted affairs, where he seemed more interested in his phone than his son. Celeste had given birth to a daughter in March, and according to Nora's intelligence network, their relationship was already showing cracks under the pressure of reality. Karma, Nora had observed with satisfaction during one of her frequent visits. Turns out building a relationship on betrayal isn't a stable foundation. Who could have predicted that? The doorbell rang, and Vivian glanced at the clock. 9:30, right on time. She smoothed her hair and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, noting with approval that the dark circles under her eyes had finally faded. Motherhood suited her better than marriage ever had. Dr. Reed Thompson stood on her doorstep with his familiar warm smile, holding a cup of coffee from the little cafe downtown and a small wrapped package. As Oliver's pediatrician, Reed had been a constant, reassuring presence during those overwhelming first weeks of new motherhood. As a man, he was everything Marcus hadn't been: honest, dependable, and genuinely interested in what she had to say. "Good morning, beautiful boy," Reed said, his attention immediately going to Oliver, who rewarded him with a delighted squeal. And good morning to his even more beautiful mother. Vivian felt the familiar flutter in her stomach that had been growing stronger with each of Reed's visits. They'd started as purely medical consultations, but had gradually evolved into something that felt dangerously like courtship. "You didn't have to bring coffee," she said, accepting the cup gratefully. "I could have made some." "I know you could have," Reed replied, settling into the chair she'd come to think of as his. "But you do so much already. Let someone take care of you for once." The words hit deeper than he probably intended. When was the last time someone had wanted to take care of her, rather than what she could provide for them? Oliver immediately reached for Reed, who accepted him with the easy confidence of someone who genuinely loved children. Watching them together, Reed making silly faces while Oliver giggled and grabbed at his stethoscope, Vivian felt something she'd thought was broken beginning to heal. "What's in the package?" she asked, settling beside them on the couch. "Just a little something I saw that reminded me of you both," Reed said, looking suddenly shy. "I hope it's not overstepping." Inside the wrapping was a children's book, beautifully illustrated, about a little bird who learns to fly after his nest is destroyed by a storm. The inscription read, For Oliver and his amazing mother, who prove every day that new beginnings can be more beautiful than what came before. Reed, Vivian blinked back unexpected tears. "It's perfect," she whispered. "There's something else," Reed said, his voice gentler now. "I know this might be too soon, and I don't want to pressure you, but there's a hospital fundraiser next. Weekend, a dinner dance. I was wondering if you might like to go with me." The invitation hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Vivian looked at Oliver, sleeping peacefully in Reed's arms, then at the man who had shown her that not all relationships were built on deception. "I'd love to," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Reed's smile could have powered the entire townhouse. "Really? Really? But I should warn you, I come as a package deal now. Oliver and I are a team." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Reed replied, and Vivian could see in his eyes that he meant it completely. As if summoned by their conversation, Nora appeared in the doorway with her key and an armload of groceries. "Sorry I'm late, oh." She stopped short, taking in the domestic scene with obvious delight. "Am I interrupting something?" "Nora, this is Dr. Reed Thompson," Vivian said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Reed, my sister Nora." "The famous sister," Reed said, standing, to shake Nora's hand while still holding Oliver. "I've heard wonderful things about you." "All lies," Nora said cheerfully, but Vivian could see her approval in the way she watched Reed interact with Oliver. "And you're the pediatrician who's been taking such good care of my nephew." "Among other things," Reed replied, glancing at Vivian with a look that made her stomach flutter again. Later, after Reed had left and Oliver was napping, Vivian and Nora sat in the kitchen, sharing the coffee and the comfortable silence of sisters who'd weathered storms together. "He's good for you," Nora said eventually. "You're different when he's around, lighter." "It's terrifying," Vivian admitted. 6 months ago, I thought I knew what love looked like, and I was completely wrong. How do I trust my judgment now?" "Because this time you're choosing with your eyes wide open," Nora replied. "Marcus love bombed you when you were young and inexperienced. Reed is courting you while you're a strong, independent woman who knows her worth. Big difference." Vivian looked around her kitchen, modest but warm, filled with evidence of the life she'd built from the ashes of her marriage. Her illustration work was thriving, with 2 book contracts already signed. Oliver was healthy and happy. She was finally learning to sleep through the night without jumping at every sound, finally beginning to believe that the worst was behind them. "I never thought I'd say this," she said slowly, "but I'm grateful it all fell apart. If Marcus hadn't betrayed me, I never would have learned how strong I actually am." "And you never would have met Reed," Nora added with a knowing smile. "And I never would have met Reed," Vivian agreed, allowing herself to imagine what next weekend might bring. Outside, the afternoon sun painted golden squares across the floor where Oliver's toys lay scattered. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was real in a way her marriage never had been. Built on truth instead of lies, chosen instead of settled for Dot, as evening approached and Oliver woke from his nap with hungry cries. Vivian gathered him close and marveled at how much her world had changed. The woman who had stood frozen in, shocked as her perfect life crumbled, was gone, replaced by someone who knew that the best foundations were built on solid ground, not shifting sand. Her phone buzzed with a text from Reed. "Thank you for saying yes. I can't wait to show you off." To everyone at the hospital. Vivian smiled, typing back, "Thank you for asking, and for seeing us as we really are." Because that, she realized, was what real love looked like, not the performance she'd been living, but the messy, honest, beautiful truth of 2 people, choosing each other with clear eyes and open hearts. The white dress that had once symbolized betrayal now seemed like the catalyst for everything good in her life. Sometimes Vivian thought as she settled Oliver for his evening feeding. The best beginnings came disguised as endings, and sometimes being broken apart was the only way to discover how strong you really were.